I am very grateful today that I've had this opportunity after all this time to explain my position to this fine group here. You've heard a lot of reports about me, Judas, over the years, and I just think I've been treated a little unfairly, honestly. And I want this opportunity today to explain my story. Is that okay? You can see both sides, okay? You know, I didn't just come on the scene when I became a disciple of Jesus. I was his, what shall I say? I was very much attracted to him. I followed him for quite a while before I was actually called to be his disciple. I actually seen his miracles, and I seen him raise the dead prior to that. And you know what? This really appealed to me. And the other thing is I was really appealed to his character. And I love Jesus. I want you to know that. I really loved him. And when I seen him do the miracles that he did, I was convinced that he was the Messiah. You know, who couldn't believe that he was the Messiah? The long-awaited Messiah that we had been waiting for so many times. And as the days went by, I got closer and closer, and to the point to where the disciples recognized me, because I was a very educated young man in the community. And I had the education of, I guess today you'd call it the equivalent of Harvard University. And so I was very, very smart, and I knew that if I could join this group, my talents could be used for his glory. to help usher in his kingdom that we had all anticipated so much. And when the disciples recognized me and knew that I wanted to be a part of this inner group, they introduced me to Jesus. And after they told Jesus of all my accomplishments and everything that I was educated with, I just knew that Jesus would accept me. And I fully anticipated that he would say, "Come on in, Judas, you're welcome. You know, we can sure use your gifts." But you know what Jesus did at the get-go? You might know this already. He looked at me and he said, "Foxes have holes to sleep in, and birds of the air have nests to lay their heads, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Now, why would he say that? You know, I didn't want to take him wrong at the very beginning, but you know, it seemed kind of cold. But he did accept me, and I thought, you know, maybe he just needs time to get to know me, needs to know my talents, because I'll tell you what, the disciples, you know, as great of guys as they were, they were untrained. They didn't have the education that I had, and they were undisciplined. You know, look at Peter. Remember Peter? Been a while since you heard from him. But Peter was impetuous. You know, he reacted. He didn't consider the consequences when he acted out. And you know, forgive me for saying, but Peter, you know, was a little presumptuous in his thought pattern, and he just couldn't be used in a way that I could be used with all my gifts. You know, I knew the strategy. I was a good advisor. I was a good strategist. And I knew what needed to be done at the right time in order to appeal to people, in order to draw them closer to him. And just think, if Jesus was about to set his kingdom up here on earth, what needed to be done? It needed to be it needed to be done just right. And I was the one for that. But like I said, the guys were great guys, but they just didn't quite have what it took to get the job done. Remember Matthew? Oh, I don't know what happened to him, but he became too honest, too particular with things, you know, and too sharp. He wasn't sharp enough in business anymore. I don't know what happened to him, but, I loved his transformation. I watched it. But, when you're in business, when you're in sales, you need to be strategic. You need to use sharpness. You need to use skill. Anybody know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
You don't just spout off the top. You need to know what you're talking about, Look at John. Remember John? Poor financer. Hate to say it. He just didn't have what it took either. I'm very thankful that Jesus accepted me because, not to be proud or anything, but without my leadership, that early church would have been an embarrassment to the cause. How could they have succeeded without me, So, one thing that was good is that the disciples recognized my leadership abilities and my finance abilities, and guess who they put in charge of the treasury, as small as it was? They put me in charge. And I knew that eventually Jesus would see my gifts and give me greater things, But, when you have gifts, when you have talent, you have to, the Torah says that a man is worthy of his hire, right? And so, why shouldn't I help myself to the funds? I was distributing these funds very wisely, I was helping the poor somewhat, I was trying to do my best anyways, and the group, I was keeping them fed, and as the ministry got larger and larger, more people followed, we got more agents and funds and all that. Well, if you work hard, and if you're striving and using your abilities to the best that you can, don't you deserve more? Don't you deserve a pay raise? Wouldn't you think? And if somebody had the audacity to call me a stealer or a thief, that's not right. Sure, I helped myself more. The more work I did, the more funds that I took for myself because I was educated. I deserved it. Don't you think? But yet, at the same time, I would look at Christ's unselfish life. It was almost like I had something pulling me to the left and something pulling me to the right, and I don't know what it was, but something just kept telling me, that to follow Christ's life, unselfish life, and I would think of that, but then right away I seen in Christ the inconsistencies of his ministry, because after all, if Christ was going to be the master, the ruler, if he was going to be set on David's throne, then shouldn't he know how to conduct it properly? Don't you think? Well, I seen things that he did that just didn't make sense. For example, remember John the Baptist? Anybody know? Remember John the Baptist? Yeah. He was pretty well known. Well, Christ knew that he was in prison. Why didn't Christ come and free him? Why didn't he take him out of prison? And then he was put to death. He was beheaded. And if that wasn't bad enough, Christ didn't even avenge those who killed him. Why not? He was the rightful ruler of David's throne. He was going to overthrow all these corrupt governments of the world. And his government was going to reign victorious over everything. Why didn't he do something about that? It puzzled me. And it caused doubts in my mind, And just little things like that. And then something else happened. The religious leaders. Now, okay, let me ask you a question. If you want to get ready for a powerful empire to be ruler over this kingdom, who do you want as your followers? Or who do you want to lead out? Who do you want to support you? That's what I'm trying to say. Who do you want to support you?
The important people.
The important people, right? Well, the religious leaders, they were important, right? Well, they come to Jesus and they said, show us a sign. We'll believe you're the Messiah. Just show us, give us a sign. And Judas is saying, yes. He knows that Jesus is going to show him a sign because he knows that he's going to win out in the end. But what did Jesus do? Nothing. And I questioned it. And on top of that, Jesus was always negative. He was always talking about trials, tribulations, not only for us, disciples, but also for himself. And not even, if that doesn't top it, he even talked about death for himself. I mean, think about it. He's going to be the head over this new kingdom that's going to conquer all the empires of the world. And Israel is going to stand up amongst everyone. And, think about it. If the Roman army, for example, if they came to Jerusalem and they were going to try to destroy Israel, they could literally lock themselves in. And Jesus had the capability of feeding them continuously, over and over. They would never have to worry. They could be locked in indefinitely. Nothing the Romans could do about it if that happened, right? Well, my hopes were just, one thing after another. My hopes were getting shattered. And I just had all these doubts. Well, then it happened. Then I knew after this particular event that Christ would stand up. Remember the 5,000, the story of the 5,000? 5,000 men plus women and children, 12 to 15,000 at least, including the women and children. It's not a lot of people. Well, okay, it was getting, the sun was about to set, and Jesus knew they had to go back, and so he said, what do we have? And he found a few loaves and fishes, and he said, okay, feed the multitude. And guess what? I was privileged to be a part of that, to be a part of the group that dispersed all these things. And it was amazing. I've never seen anything like it. I had this basket full of fish and loaves, and as I would feed the families, the men usually would take it and disperse it, and the women, the single families, where the husband wasn't present, I would feed them, and then as I would go to take some more out for the next family, guess what? It just, it multiplied. It never, I've never seen anything like it. And I got so excited, I started whispering to everybody, friends, this is a Messiah. We need to set him up on the throne. It's his rightful position. We need to do something about this. And so they did. And after everybody was fed, Judas led the way, and they started getting all excited. Even the disciples were all excited, and they said, "Man, we gotta put Jesus on the throne, But here's the problem, Jesus was so meek and humble that he might be afraid to, too meek to take the throne. So we might have to be, I don't like to use the word force, but for lack of a better word, we might have to help him, to take that position. And so they all got up and they started to head towards Jesus. And you know what Jesus did? Let me tell you first. My heart, the disciples' heart, we were just, this was the most exciting day of our lives. And as they went to do it, as they went to take him by force, you know what Jesus did? Stop. And everybody froze in their tracks. I'd never seen anything like this. Here we go. For a minute, my heart just sunk. And I said, well, wait, what is he doing? And then And then he told us all, the disciples, to get in the boat and leave. What's going on? I don't understand. Why is he doing this? He needs to set up his throne here. I just don't understand this. And my hope was becoming fast disappointed, and I seriously had doubts anymore. And soon after that, if you remember the story of Simeon had leprosy, and Jesus healed him, and so Simeon felt obligated, and so he invited Jesus and the disciples to his home. Well, we were all chatting and visiting, and all of a sudden, what's this smell? Perfume. Where's it? And then it just irradiated the whole room. And they said, what's going on here? And they looked around and, Mary? What's Mary doing here? How did she get in? Remember Mary Magdalene? The one Jesus cast out 7 devils? What is she doing? Judas was just irate. And he said, what is she doing? He thought to himself, and then he said, why this waste? This could have been given to the poor. And under his breath he was thinking, I could have gotten some of that out of that as well. Some money out of that as well from that purchase. But he made it look like I made it look like I was interested in the poor, you see. And I expected Jesus to say, yeah, Mary, why are you wasting all this perfume? You could have sold this and we could have used it for the poor. But instead, you know what Jesus did? He said, leave her alone. And I was taken aback, all these people around. And here I am, one of the top educated men in the place, and he said, leave her alone. What she has done, she was preparing for my burial. So not only did he rebuke me, not only did he make me feel bad, but he's also talking about his burial again. What is this? Burial? Come on. And I pretty much had it. That's it. And just because of that, I determined to be avenged. Because nobody talks to me like that. Not even my master. And so I was determined after that to make Jesus pay in a good way. I just wanted him to learn a lesson, okay? I want you to know that I didn't do anything to him that, but I wanted him to understand that he didn't have the education that I had. And so, I had a little more to offer, okay, as far as the education goes, okay? And then, right after that, he was speaking to the multitude, but he was looking at me, and he said, unless you eat my flesh and drink of my blood, there's no life in you. And there went that guilt feeling again. I knew at that point that Christ was talking not about a physical kingdom, but a spiritual kingdom. I was convinced that if I stay connected with this man, I won't see any of that. All I will see is persecution and maybe death. And so he determined at that point not to follow him. And he followed at a distance. I followed at a distance, and the others, went ahead. And they were disappointed too in all the things that were happening. But I couldn't see myself a part of this group anymore. What do you do? My hopes were so much in this earthly kingdom. We Jews were anticipating it for so long, for many, many years, and we knew this was the time that the Messiah would come and set up this kingdom, and my heart was set on that, but Jesus just let us know that it's not going to happen the way we anticipated. That shattered my hopes. That just shattered them. And thereafter, I knew that there was no hope of a physical kingdom. And so, and try to understand this, folks. You got to understand my heart. You got to understand where I'm coming from. But after that, I wanted the people to see that Jesus was wrong, that there was going to be a physical, earthly kingdom, and I was determined to see that happen, regardless of what Jesus said. And so I purposely started causing division. I started purposely to spread rumors. I told the disciples everything that Jesus said. I started twisting what Jesus said and made it look like he was talking about a physical kingdom. And you know what it did to all the disciples? Just what I anticipated, because they're not very educated, like I said. They were all confused because they trusted me, and for good reason. You know, because I was the one that was in charge. I knew what was going on in the world. And so I caused all these problems, but it was for a reason. It was to teach Christ a lesson so that he could appreciate me more. You know? But it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. And it just seemed to get worse, and I almost couldn't stand being around him anymore. I hate to say it, but, you know, can you understand? Can you understand where I'm coming from? You know, all these things that happened to me, that the way Christ treated me and the way he made me look bad, you know, it was all for a reason, you know. I didn't do anything without a reason, okay? You know, I'm not that stupid, you know, but, well, anyways, long story short is Passover was coming now. Passover. Paschal service, we called it back then. Today we call it Easter. We celebrated the Paschal service on the same day every year. Not on the same day, but on the same date every year. Different day every year, but this particular time it was served in an upper room where we all met together, and of course it was in memory of the Passover season. And of course, what happens when you first walk into a room? You get dusty feet and everything, and there's usually a servant there, isn't there? Servant to wash your feet. Well, guess what? That wasn't a servant. A servant, wasn't it? And the disciples started feeling a little jittery and uncomfortable, and they just kept glancing at each other and knowing what they were supposed to do, but they didn't do it. Judas knew that he didn't have to do it because he was above them anyways. If anybody had to do it, they had to do it. You know. So just the story is heart-wrenching when I think about it. Some of the things, the way I was treated, the way I was put down, and then make matters worse. Here's this so-called Messiah. This put the nail in the coffin. This was the straw that broke the camel's back, right? When Jesus walked around, he got a basin of water, and he got a towel, and he washed everybody's feet. A servant. Really? Huh? Come on. You know, the throne of David, the Messiah, King of the universe, washing people's feet, come on. You know, when he did my feet, I had two, I feel it again, that struggle inside. At one point, I just wanted to weep and confess my sins, because I knew I was guilty, I knew I was wrong. But on the other hand, I said, no, this can't be the Messiah, because he wouldn't be doing this if he was. And so, after Jesus was finished, after a short time, Jesus said to me, he said, what you're going to do it quickly. His eyes just pierced my eyes, and he knew exactly what I was up to. You heart so often. He knew what I was doing. And the rest of the disciples, they probably thought, well, he's probably just coming to go do some business or whatever. But Jesus looked in my eyes and said, what you're going to do quickly. So I resisted that guilt feeling to confess my sins. And after that moment, when I surrendered, when I didn't surrender, and when I finally said, enough is enough, that was the last opportunity that I would ever have to stand with Jesus. I went to the religious leaders, and later that night, I came back, and I kissed Jesus on the cheek, thus signifying that this is the one that comes to be the Messiah. Malchus and the other soldiers were gathered around. Now, I want you to understand something, okay, before I tell you that story, okay? I don't want you to think that I purposely turned him over to death or anything, okay? It really wasn't my fault. Because Jesus so often, you remember when he walked to the cliff? The people, they were going to throw him over that cliff, and he walked right through the crowd. He did that so often, I fully anticipated that Jesus would do that. But not only that, but when he did that again this time, I already got some money from the Pharisees. I was using shrewdness. I was using my education, my ability to show that, I'll get him back one way or another. But when Jesus' hands were tied behind his back, he didn't fight. He didn't walk through them this time. Of course, a light from heaven shone. It was unbelievable. I know you may not have heard of this before, but a light shone from heaven as they were all standing there, and they fell like dead men. It was like, what just happened? Well, they got up and they got their composure back. And Peter, thinking after this, well, Christ is going to free himself. So he went, and you know what he did with the sword? Anybody? Remember? Mm-hmm. He cut off the ear of Malchus. Malchus said, yeah. I think that was his name. Mm-hmm. Well, what did Jesus do? He untied himself. He broke the bonds and he put his ear back on. It was unbelievable. And I thought, for sure now Jesus is going to defend himself and free us all. But he didn't. He put his hands back behind him. And he was bound once again. I followed Jesus. I followed Jesus at a distance as he was marched to the palace and in a courtyard where they whipped him and they beat him. Now, they were whipping him with this whip, but what was terrible about this whip is that it wasn't a rope like you have today. You think a whip, like what they use on horses. Not at all. It was made, I think it was bone, and it had these sharp edges. And as they would whip him, as they would pull back, chunks of skin came off his flesh. And the Torah says that, that he was beaten, he was mocked, and it was so bad that he wouldn't be recognized. And that was definitely the case. I was just horrified. I said, isn't he going to free himself? I got a few pieces of silver here. He's not guilty. But the trial continued. And then finally, I got to the point where guilt, not for my sin, but just guilt that he allowed himself to be taken. Why did he allow himself to be taken? He could have freed himself, but he didn't. He chose to be taken by these wicked people. And I didn't think he did. I wanted to be a part of this kingdom, and I felt terribly guilty, not because of the sins that I had committed, because I knew that my probation had closed. I knew that there was no more hope for me because I chose to stay in rebellion, and I understood that as soon as I left the upper room, that there was no more hope for me. I felt guilty just because I was the one putting the Son of God to death. Me, Judas. I was the guilty one. And as I couldn't stand it any longer, I took those pieces of silver and I ran through the hall. Much larger than this. People everywhere. And I said, Caiaphas, he's an innocent man. Why? You can't take his life. I have betrayed an innocent man. The whole building, the whole church, the whole sanctuary was just frozen when they said, they didn't say anything. They knew that this was planned because of what Judas did, because of what I did. And they said, after a while, even Caiaphas couldn't say anything. He was spellbound. He was just, they know who I am. They know what we've done. And do you know what he did after a minute? When he regained his composure? He said, what is that to me? That was it. What is that to me? And I knew that life wasn't worth living. I just couldn't bear the guilt any longer. And I threw my shillings down and I said, I have betrayed an innocent man. And at that point I ran out of the hall. And I ran into a field called Potter's Field, and I took a rope, pretty high up, and I hung myself. And it was such a bad fall that just everything, my flesh was just torn apart, and the dogs started eating everything, and whenever anybody walked by, it was silent because they knew what took place. This was the man that betrayed the Son of God. All because I was greedy. All because I was selfish. All because I wanted this power. All because I didn't fully surrender to Jesus. My life was wasted now. How about you today? Are you going to live the life that I lived? Are you going to spurn the counsel of Jesus? Or will you end up where I ended up? I pray. It's too late for me to pray.